Can you infinitely sustain logbooks? This is something I was wondering recently, because mapping for logbooks is pretty lame. While I did get several a day, it took quite a few maps, and honestly, logbooks are so fun that why would I ever want to do maps when I could instead be running my money printers, aka logbooks? The only problem with this is, you then have to trade a ton for the logbooks, and time spent trading for logbooks is time spent not running the money printer. But what if you could use logbooks to get more logbooks? So, to test this idea, I started with what I consider to be a pretty good sample size of 110 burial medallions. The idea was, instead of running maps to get my logbooks, or trading for them, I run as many Knights of the Sun logbooks as possible. I use all the currencies at Dannig to buy more logbooks, and I get infinite money along the way. Now, because I had some doubts, I decided to cheat a little bit, and add in some split beasts, so that I was effectively doubling the value of each logbook that I got, or at least each one that I deemed valuable enough to risk splitting in half. Thus began my quest for infinite logbooks. This look at my quest for infinite logbooks was brought to you in part due to the generous support of my patrons and YouTube channel members. More about how you can help at the end of the video. So I had all my currencies, and I went over to Dannig, and I started my testing. It took about an hour for me to go through all of the currency, and I ended up with a bunch of Astragali, logbooks, exotic coins, scrap metal, and various artifacts for the other Kalgurans. The general prioritization that I used was to buy every Astragali, every exotic coin, the cheap artifacts, and the cheap scrap metals, because I didn't really want to lose money, and sometimes the sun artifacts were just more expensive than the things being offered. I got around 14 logbooks, which isn't a bad number to start out, especially if you're trying to build a logbook empire and you're using Split Beast to double that into potentially 28. I also tallied up the other things that I got from a vendor, along with the general costs and returns that I was looking at, and it looked like just sitting at Dannig and refreshing him constantly could yield you about 4x an hour, which means he's probably on par with Tujin. Although like with any economy thing in Path of Exile, your experience may vary depending on the day because prices are constantly shifting. From here, I split the 11 most valuable logbooks and got ready to run them. Splitting 11 gave me 22, plus the additional 3 for 25 total. After going through all the logbooks, prioritizing rolling the Knights of the Sun for the highest quantity and blessing the implicits, which, by the way, I did the blessing before splitting them, so I could save a few blessed orbs, I got about 80 more rerolls, which isn't quite the 110 I started with, but is still a sizable number. And so I was pretty hopeful that not only would I be making a significant profit, but I'd also have infinite logbooks and I wouldn't have to go back to maps or buy more. And this was when disaster struck. Because while I did get 9 more logbooks from the 80 rerolls, which was about on par, it seems to be about 1 logbook per 9 rerolls, or maybe it's 1 per 10 and I got slightly lucky. None of these new logbooks had Knights of the Sun, so I wasn't able to sustain further logbooks from here. Thus ended my endeavor to have infinite logbook sustain without having to buy them or map. Now I know the sample size isn't exhaustive. Maybe 200 is just too small, and I needed to buy 2,000 to hit that critical mass that I needed to sustain. After all, when you're mapping, if you start with a small number of maps, a pool of let's just say 10, there's also a chance you won't sustain your tier 16s. But if you have a much larger pool, such as 100, then it's much easier to get that going, reach critical mass, and sustain infinitely. Although that said, because of a randomness involved, I do think there's a good chance you just can't sustain logbooks in Path of Exile infinitely, even when you cheat and use split beasts. But I don't feel like my time was wasted, despite not being able to do what I set out to. I spent roughly 20 to 25x, and I do apologize, I didn't keep super perfect track of all the numbers here, but I spent 20 to 25x, and by the time I'd run all the logbooks, I had well over 30 Exalts in profit. It took a few hours, So we can assume that if you're a little bit more efficient than I was, you could maybe get 10x an hour. If you want to be more conservative, it's probably 6x an hour, which means running logbooks is very profitable. I know this is probably a shocking revelation that no one by the name of Grimro has mentioned at all anywhere. But yes, logbooks were profitable, and in fact the item level of the logbooks that I got were all quite good, with several being item level 86. The quality of the mods, however, were not as good as if I was just buying them. It's relatively easy to buy 10 logbooks that are all Black Scythe or Knights of the Sun that are all Shipwreck Reef. It's a lot harder to expect to get that when you're rolling them on a vendor. But free shit is free shit. Not that it's completely free because there's an opportunity cost, but since you're making a profit or recovering most of your money spent on the currency, the opportunity cost for the time and the artifacts from the other rerolls and the other artifacts you're purchasing, you can kind of think of this as free, quote-unquote, logbooks. Which is why I hesitate to call this whole experiment a failure. At the end of the day, what I learned was that you probably can't infinitely sustain logbooks. I may try again with 200 or even 400 rerolls, because if my sample size was too small, it might be pretty cool, and I don't have much of an inclination to map unless I need to level my character up. And the second takeaway is, running logbooks is extremely profitable and absolutely something that you should be doing if your build is capable. So I hope you found this little look into my insanity on min-maxing Path of Exile to be helpful. Let me know about your logbook successes down in the comments below. Thank you for watching, and if you liked the video, be sure to give it a thumbs up. A special thanks to my YouTube channel members and patrons, whose generous support keeps me from needing to accept sketchy mobile game sponsorships. If you want the best way to keep up with my video releases and live streams, or maybe just hang out and chat with a bunch of like-minded people, be sure to join the Discord. You can find all these links down in the description below. Thank you again, and I hope you have a great day.